Leave a like and you'll find your fortune. So I'm playing Resident Evil, and then there's this sequence. It's insanely cool, but it feels like it's pulled from a completely different game. Not so much survival horror, more like some kind of big cinematic blockbuster. Moving on, Leon is literally clinging to life on a crashing train, and I swear I've seen that somewhere before. Fine, whatever. Even though just half an hour ago we were in this kind of scene. And that kind of overlap with very Uncharted-like moments feels kind of crazy to me. But okay, let's call it a coincidence. Except over the past few years I've kept noticing more and more nods to Uncharted popping up across all kinds of games. They're everywhere. Then a movie comes out. Insiders start reporting that a spin-off is in development at another studio. Other sources claim a full-fledged Uncharted 5 is being discussed at Naughty Dog. And the series creative director Sean Escape casually drops "never say never." It really feels like right now, like today, is the perfect moment for a new Uncharted, but it's been 10 years since the last one. 0 new games, or at least similar games. Almost. And it's not even clear what's so difficult about it. Parkour, puzzle section, and a charismatic lead. That's it. You're looking at a ready-made formula for a 100% hit blockbuster. And yet, that formula has only given us a couple of somewhat decent but not successful successors, spawned a bunch of ugly imitators, served as the foundation for several games that never even made it out, and straight up killed 2 studios. So what exactly is this Uncharted curse hanging over the industry? That's what we're going to talk about. Why has no one successfully replicated Uncharted formula so far? Who came closest to cracking the formula more than others? What is the true magic of Uncharted at all when you look at it years later, and why do we actually need Uncharted just right now? And I mean right now, even if you don't realize it yet. Let's talk about a world that desperately needs a new Uncharted, but just can't seem to get one. And before we begin, let's take a moment to remember what Uncharted actually is. No, okay, can I be honest? After years and years of essays about crumbling rocks, you've already heard plenty about what Uncharted actually is. So instead, let's just quickly and cleanly run through the key points, just to understand where all this is coming from. So, by 2005, Naughty Dog was already a fully self-sufficient studio with a strong portfolio. They had made several entries in the hugely successful platformer Crash Bandicoot and the somewhat less successful action-adventure Jak and Daxter. And even just from the tonal shift in Jak, it was clear that the dogs were getting tired of light-hearted fairy tales. They wanted something more serious, more grounded. The only problem? They had never made anything serious or grounded before. They had never developed for the PlayStation 3, and in 2005, that was exactly the task ahead of them. Create an exclusive for Sony's upcoming console that would push its hardware to the limit. Except, the studio's engineers had no idea how to work with its architecture. To be fair, almost no one did at the time. And to make things worse, their first prototype for the new game Project Big about terrorists seizing an underwater base sank fast. Right in the middle of development, 2K Boston announced BioShock, complete with stunning screenshots of its own underwater base. At that point, Naughty Dog had no choice but to hit the brakes and scrap their work. The comparisons were not in their favor. So overall, the studio had to improvise on the fly, even if they didn't fully understand what they were doing. And out of that chaos came all the fundamental building blocks of Uncharted. First, the near-perfect gameplay loop. From the very beginning, Naughty Dog wanted to make an adventure, even if a slightly more serious one than their previous games. So they added guns and shooting early on, but almost as an afterthought. The main focus was still supposed to be platforming and puzzles. That's why, much like in Jak and Daxter, shooting initially relied on simplified auto-aim, weapons would lock onto enemies and the player just had to pull the trigger at the right time. But it quickly became clear that with their new push toward realism, auto-aim felt awkward, clunky, just wrong. Players just lacked the freedom to handle weapons the way they actually wanted. So auto-aim was removed, and shooting became a full-fledged and equal part of the experience. And over series, the gameplay loop was tuned with sniper-level precision. Just as you start getting tired of shootouts, here's a puzzle. Tired of thinking? Time to climb. Had enough climbing? Back to shooting. And the game keeps pushing you through this cycle, never letting you get bored. Giving players aiming freedom was just the beginning. That sense of freedom started spreading across every aspect of the game. The dogs began expanding their levels. More space, more paths, more branching routes, more ways to deal with enemies depending on the player's style. By the fourth game, Uncharted had fully evolved into a semi-open, semi-sandbox experience, offering flexible gameplay in all its variety. Sneak through the bushes, swing across a gap with a rope, climb higher, drop down on someone who's been left exposed, and then finish off the rest cleanly. A formula that would set the series apart from other linear adventures, carry over into The Last of Us, and eventually spread into other franchises chasing that same feel. At that point, Naughty Dog already understood they were diving into another kind of adventure, only now more serious, one that demanded a more serious story than in their other games, and a more serious writer, eventually. That writer became Amy Hennig, a literature graduate who dropped out of film school after deciding that games had a brighter future than cinema. By 2005, she had already written for Legacy of Kain, worked as game director on Jak 3, and now it was her turn to pick up the pen and write Naughty Dog's first truly adult project. The dogs wanted their own Indiana Jones, their own Lara Croft, so Hennig surrounded herself with pulp adventure novels and gave the game a light, playful tone, which would later become inseparable from the series.
It worked! There he is! Up there! Oh boy.
And this is important, because even though Naughty Dog wanted to move away from cartoons and fairy tales, they didn't want to go full realism, at least not yet. A fun, humorous adventure set in a grounded world was still the priority, and from that came another essential pillar of Uncharted: wide-range geography. Because at the end of the day, this is still about adventure. The story needed to take you across the most beautiful corners of the world, real and not. Amazon, Istanbul, Nepal, Tibet, Shambhala, London, Cartagena, Syria, Yemen, Rub al Khali, Iran, Panama, Italy, Scotland, Madagascar, Libertalia. By the time the second game came around, it became clear: want a vacation? You've already got one at home. In that box, in that disc. Just boot up Uncharted and travel the world. They locked in the locations, it was time to figure out who to send in those beautiful places. Naughty Dog had no experience working with the professional actors, and not much money for them either. So the studio hired a relative unknown, someone whose biggest credit at the time was a pretty average soap opera role.
She's also very capable of making a lot of trouble for someone when she doesn't like them.
Again, for budget reasons, that same actor ended up playing not just the main character, but also random soldiers the hero would gun down. Budget's not infinite, might as well make the most of the talent. But it actually worked both ways. And in the end, it led to the studio establishing a performance capture standard. In short, the deal was, Naughty Dog didn't just go for voice acting, they aimed for full-on performance capture, which of course they had never done before either. So instead of strictly following the script, they gave the actor room to improvise however he wanted. And Nolan North, the one who played Drake, decided to bring a lot of himself into the role, really make it his own. Kind, genuine, easygoing, just an all-around likable guy who likes to joke around. Basically, a grown-up kid.
You're watching the right, it's again left. The right is just like, could stay home.
Hennig latched onto that image, one that North was essentially co-creating with her. She excited to see in Nathan Drake someone who wasn't just another jacked soldier solving problems with a single look. No, he's an absolutely ordinary, imperfect person. In situations like this, Miss Croft grabs a ledge flawlessly. Indiana Jones hooks his whip on the first try, but Nathan Drake can actually fail at both.
I missed.
And the series is full of little details like that. This brings us to the second to last pillar of Uncharted, what's commonly referred to as attention to detail. Now, that's actually a shitty label. Uncharted wasn't the first to do it, won't be the last, and your horse's ball shrinking in the cold doesn't suddenly make Red Dead Redemption 2 the heir to Uncharted. Let's just call it world responsiveness. Those little rocks sliding down a slope? Sure, that's nice. But it's way better when they slide with you, reinforcing gravity and momentum, signaling how dangerous your move is. The whole world feels like it's really teetering on the edge with you. Character dialogue during gameplay? Sure, great. But even better when it actually supports the gameplay, commenting on possible routes, hinting at puzzle solutions, reacting to changes in the environment, and they're physically present too. Because Nolan North is performing with his whole body.
No, 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 crap, no, crap! Oh!
Climbing? Really cool. But it's even better when it's not just you interacting with the world interacts with you. Something breaks off, something collapses, and you slip, fall, slide.
Whoa, 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 whoa! Ah! Oh, shit!
Fights are animated to account for the environment. Tons of puzzles rely on physics, and the series keeps expanding that variety as it goes. Long story short, you're in a constant dialogue with the world. Across 4 games, thousands upon thousands of animations were created, some by hand, some through motion capture, all to add that human touch instead of pure mechanical interaction. And every one of those animations says something about the character. Hennig explicitly wanted gameplay to communicate just as much about Drake as his own mouth. It's funny that even animation based on the object avoidance system, which actually appeared in mainstream games long before Uncharted, still ends up being associated with Uncharted to this day, almost by default. And for some developers, Uncharted precisely became their reference point. But we'll get to that little tragedy later. And if the soul of Uncharted is, without a doubt, Nathan Drake, then the engine driving it is definitely, certainly the action. More specifically, set pieces. These are those big, expensive, spectacular sequences that instantly spike your heart rate and empty your wallet even faster, because that was the reason to buy the game day one. Every time you put the disc into your console, you knew what was waiting for you. A collapsing building and you're inside it. A chase where you're jumping across moving trucks. A sequence on top of a speeding train, climbing along that same train as it's falling apart. A firefight on a ship where cargo is sliding across the deck with the waves. A shootout inside an airplane in an open cargo hold. And then countless slides toward the abyss, frantic runs through crumbling ruins, careful sidesteps along ledges, and those iconic Crash Bandicoot run. The entire Uncharted series was built on a rock-solid Mission Impossible style principle. First, you come up with insane action set pieces, and only then do you string a story around all of them. By and large, if somebody asked me to describe Uncharted franchise in 2 words, I'd just show it. Oh, and money. Yeah, money. Let's not pretend this is all just about talent. Real talent needs real funding. The kind you can throw straight into the fire that fuels real creative ideas. And Uncharted very quickly became one of Sony's platinum franchises, which gave Naughty Dog a blank check for pretty much anything they wanted for years ahead. You want high-end motion capture, long detailed narrative development, explosive set pieces, obsessive attention to detail? What was that? Sorry, can't hear you over the sound of stacks of cash being thrown around. In short, Sony would just keep pouring money into any Naughty Dog idea until it worked. So let's put it together. Uncharted is a perfect gameplay loop, a semi-open, semi-sandbox structure, a light tone, a wide-range geography, a performance capture standard, a world responsiveness, set pieces and money. No mystical, intangible nonsense, just a clear, structured blueprint. Just don't copy it completely. And yet, in the 10 years since the 4th game, no one has truly managed to replicate Uncharted. Not that they didn't try. But before we get to its successors, there's an important question. Why did Uncharted even end? Well, Uncharted ended simply because it ended. It has a clear and logical conclusion. Nathan Drake's story is told. There's no real need to continue it. But why the Uncharted era came to an end? And there's a pretty simple explanation for that. That's the result of the context at the time. Uncharted began at the peak of adventure storytelling. It's 2005, The Mummy Returns came out, excellent sequel to Pirates of the Caribbean is just around the corner. National Treasure did well at the box office, practically guaranteeing a sequel, and trailing alongside them were the bootleg versions, The Rundown, Sahara, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Adventure stories in the 2000s were in their prime. But by the end of the decade, the financial crisis hit. The cultural aftershock of September 11th attacks finally began to ripple through mainstream media, and people in general started reflecting more, for several reasons. Media got louder, the internet became more accessible, globalization became undeniable. People looked at the world around them and wanted more complex heroes. They wanted to hold the world accountable for difficult questions. So instead of heroes with that, and that kind of face, audiences gravitated toward anti-heroes with that, and that face. There was a growing demand for darkness, realism and depth, and the era of lighthearted adventure came to an end. Indiana Jones, Pirates of the Caribbean, National Treasure, The Mummy and Tomb Raider came to an end. At least we thought so. The age of pirates, adventurers and charming rogues was over, and Uncharted was about all three. And in the end, this is exactly what made Neil Druckmann come out and say it, loud and clear. We're able to put our final brushstroke on that story and say that we're done. We're moving on. But while Uncharted ended as a series, it didn't end as an idea. Developers kept trying to recreate its spirit, with, let's say, mixed success. One of the earliest attempts was James Bond 007 Bloodstone in 2010, which makes sense. Nathan Drake borrowed from Bond just as much as he did from Lara Croft or Indiana Jones.
Just try to keep your ducks clean.
Activision even had a whole sub-series built around the Daniel Craig's Bond. Quantum of Solace, GoldenEye 007, Bloodstone 007 Legends. But Bloodstone in particular feels like it absorbed as much as possible from Drake's adventures. Travel through the world, climbing across collapsing set pieces, cover-based shooting, stealth, melee combat, vehicle sequences on boats and cars, and even those segments the internet charmingly dubbed travelogue. That blend of walking on dialogue, where that is pretending to be real gameplay. Uncharted used them sparingly. Bond, on the other hand, abused them.
We lost the signal when it went below ground.
I'll home in on your signal.
I'm marking the location on your phone now.
And we can't take the chance of anyone listening in on us.
Bloodstone didn't shy away from echoing Uncharted's action scenes. Sometimes it almost felt like it inspired Uncharted vice versa, considering the third game with that iconic plane shootout was still a year away. And suddenly, the setting shifts to jungles and ancient ruins, places that Daniel Craig's Bond had never even come close to visiting. Now, there's no hard proof of direct borrowing. That's up in the air. But let's be real, a game in that genre cannot be made with one of its two main competitors in mind. And reviewers at the time were quick to point out just how much it resembled Uncharted.
Most of this bother revolves around duck and cover shooting, as we've seen done to great effect in Gears of War and Uncharted.
The whole game feels like it's very inspired by Uncharted 2.
This game is similar to Uncharted.
The series didn't exactly go down in history, of course. At best, it's remembered as a decent movie tie-in, which isn't a high bar. But that same year, 2010, saw the release of another game, one that was playing something like a game of hot potato with Uncharted. Stay with me. Heavenly Sword was one of the first major titles to use what we now call performance capture. Recording not just voice, not just movement, but both at the same time. Uncharted was the second game with that feature, followed right behind Heavenly Sword, and came out just a month later. But the next game from Ninja Theory was following Uncharted's lead. Bright, juicy jungles and ruins as the setting, companions playing a major role in gameplay, travelogues, yeah, there are lots of them. A strong focus not just on action but on puzzles and exploration, simplified parkour with those magnetic ledges, where spectacle matters more than precision, and sometimes it feels like set pieces lifted straight out of Doc's game, jumping across collapsing ruins, running straight toward the camera from danger, pure Crash Bandicoot energy, climbing along a collapsing train, which turns into climbing along a falling spaceship. Later, Uncharted would wink back at Enslaved, Odyssey to the West with its own falling plane sequence, almost like the two studios were perfecting the same idea together, trying to make one truly iconic scene. But Ninja Theory never got to return the favor. Enslaved didn't sell enough to justify a sequel. Still, for a brief moment we got to witness this strange, beautiful tango between two studios. relay came much later. Back in 2005, Uncharted itself was built on references. Indiana Jones' unexpectedly Back to the Future, which partially inspired the protagonist, and of course Tomb Raider. In fact, Nathan Drake took the spotlight from Lara Croft right at the moment where the series started to fall apart. But as Drake's adventures were winding down, it was Lara who tried to reclaim that territory. And of course, she couldn't do it without looking over at her competitor. That Unchartedification didn't come easy to Lara. The series tried to stay relevant by chasing trends. Stronger cinematic direction, more story, bigger action set pieces, but in the process this led to the series' lost part of its identity. Let's be more specific. We are talking about puzzles that used to challenge you, and now just hold your hand. We are talking about platforming that once required precision and momentum, and now reduced to magnetic ledges and scripted spectacle. Acrobatic gunfights gone entirely, and Lara just glued to covers trained in the exact same school as Marcus Phoenix. No, Lara did have her own face, a dirty, worn-down, life-beaten face, survival elements, crafting, tools like ice axes and bows with multiple arrow types. The tone also distanced itself from both Uncharted and the original Tomb Raider, presenting Lara as far more vulnerable and human than her angular prototype. But everything new the reboot brought in really lacked depth. And everything old, the things people loved the series for, simply had no room left, because Uncharted with its gunfights, QTEs, simplified parkour effectively pushed Lara's identity out of the picture entirely. That, for the record, didn't make the Tomb Raider reboot a bad game, but it did leave a much smaller mark on popular culture than it probably could have. The ambition was aiming much higher. And honestly, that turned out to be the best case scenario in this particular context, because the other heirs of Nathan Drake, who had retired, turned out to be genetic degenerates, who immediately after the series ended rushed to fight for their father's throne. Twisted, clumsy, ugly, lazy. The absolute best you could hope for from those projects was that they'd at least look decent. I repeat, look, not play. At worst, which is most of them, they felt like someone had drained Uncharted of everything that mattered. The visuals, the gameplay, the budget, the fun, the soul. All of them tried a bit too desperately to fill the gap left by their main inspiration, though in reality they were doing the opposite, lowering the overall interest in the genre, if they even got noticed at all, because finding actual gameplay footage for some of them is a big challenge in itself.
Okay. Alright.
But hey, at least they existed, and that means even this wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to Uncharted's legacy. Project Ranger. That was the name of a spy adventure action game from Black Tusk Studios. The player was supposed to travel the world and carry out espionage missions in the spirit of Mission Impossible. Almost nothing is known about the game except for one detail. It was meant to be Xbox's answer to Uncharted, and Xbox in general had always been looking for a symmetrical exclusive system seller. But in 2013 Microsoft acquired Gears of War from Epic Games, renamed Black Tusk to the Coalition, and simply abandoned Project Ranger, considering it not promising enough. Call of Duty Fog of War. The Call of Duty series seems to have been chasing the Uncharted vibe for quite a while, but in 2023 it came dangerously close to actually becoming Uncharted in an unannounced spin-off about the Vietnam War. It was supposed to be a third-person shooter with a darker tone unusual for the series, and the creative director at Sledgehammer Games described it as Uncharted meets Call of Duty, but the Sledgehammer team was urgently reassigned to Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, which Infinity Ward didn't have time to finish due to tight deadlines, and Vietnam was cancelled. But I can assure you the saddest story of an Uncharted that never happened is, without a doubt, Project Ragtag. In 2009, LucasArts was not at the peak of its form. The studio was going through constant reorganizations. Layoffs followed one after another, and for every successful game there were 3 unsuccessful ones. The situation was supposed to be saved by an ambitious Star Wars project, Star Wars Underworld, which started as a GTA-like game, then became Gears of War and eventually turned into Uncharted in a galaxy far, far away. In the end, the game was titled Star Wars 1313, and you were supposed to play as a bounty hunter navigating the criminal underlevels of Coruscant. The team was drowning in crunch, pushing the first prototype into a playable state, figuring out what the perfect Uncharted in space should look like, and going through 9 circles of hell, getting everything approved personally by George Lucas. But eventually, the developers did manage to produce a playable demo, presented it at E3 2012, and impressed gamers all over the world. And that's where the streak of success ended. First, Lucas demanded the entire game be reworked, making Boba Fett the main character. And just as the team reluctantly accepted that they would have to rebuild the project from the ground up, Disney acquired Lucasfilm, shut down LucasArts, and all game rights were handed over to Electronic Arts. Surprisingly, that didn't mean the end to everything. Anyone who wanted to continue working and keep their job was invited to interview at Visceral Games, who created Dead Space series. They inherited all the work on 1313 and were deciding what to do next. But as I said, the original team's streak of success had already run its course long ago. Visceral's general manager Steve Paputzis flat out refused to continue the old project and announced that the studio would like to start a new Star Wars project from the ground up. Don't worry, karma would catch up with him soon enough. The new project was called Ragtag. It was essentially Black Flag in a galaxy far away. An action-adventure about interstellar pirates with an open world, where the player can use space travel and boarding enemy ships. But soon Amy Hennig, that very former writer from Naughty Dog, joined the team. And she wanted to scrap everything and turn the game into a linear, story-driven, light-hearted adventure. And just like that, Uncharted was back on the table. This time, though, no one really objected. Everyone trusted Hennig's vision. After all, she had been behind one of the most legendary game series in the industry. But here's the thing. Her ambitions didn't match reality. The team was too small. Half of them had been reassigned by Electronic Arts to work on post-launch content for Battlefield Hotline. Development in San Francisco, where Visceral was based, was extremely expensive. And then there was Frostbite, which the publisher was forcing on developers, and which felt less like an engine and more like a massive, technically flawed pain in the ass. Developers later admitted they were essentially trying to build Uncharted 5 on an engine that didn't even have the tools for Uncharted 1. At some point, the studio finally scraped together its first demo. Not even gameplay, just a video that ended up being a handout for players at E3 2016. In it, the protagonist walks out of a cantina on Tatooine, brushing against the door with his hand. That Uncharted-style animation I mentioned earlier. And for this one simple animation, the developer spent several months. It was a disaster. After 4 years of development, Visceral Games had 3 nearly playable levels to show. One former employee claimed they were essentially just copied scenes from Uncharted. And not particularly well copied either. And the very next day, right after this version of the game was shown to Electronic Arts executives for review, the game was cancelled. Visceral was shut down. In the end, this whole push to get even remotely close to Uncharted may have given us one decent reboot, but it also spawned a bunch of pointless clones, led at least 4 projects into a dead end, and basically killed 2 studios. That was the signal. It's better not to mess with Uncharted at all. At least, until recently. You see, for reasons that aren't entirely clear, the past few years have seen a record number of games released, or at least announced, that perfectly capture in either Uncharted setting or its spirit. Guardians of the Galaxy, Star Wars Outlaws, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Mafia: The Old Country, Split Fiction. Now, to be fair, Joseph Fares has always looked to the work of Neil Druckmann and Bruce Straley for inspiration. But those comparisons rarely worked in his favor.
And it employs an Uncharted-like approach to shooting, and it never felt good.
The third-person shooting doesn't feel as good as something like Uncharted 4.
It's not like Uncharted.
Right.
The gameplay and the action, the story, the character interactions, those are the kind of things that are way out
doesn't do as successfully.
Until now, with split fiction critics and players are finally starting to admit that he's actually captured that vibe.
I mean, this is on par with Uncharted, and
definitely there are some moments that evoke the Uncharted franchise.
I think it gives off very heavy Uncharted vibes.
That's kind of like Uncharted, yeah.
A little bit of like Uncharted-like action.
This is some Uncharted shit right here.
And ahead of us, there's still Marvel 1943, Rise of Hydra, another adventure-action game, and once again from Amy Hennig. And then there's Blood Message, already dubbed by the press as the Chinese Uncharted 5. So, why now? Why did it take 10 years for a Nathan Drake style of adventure to reach its renaissance? Why is it only now that developers have finally managed to make this formula work? Especially when the formula behind Naughty Dog's other hit The Last of Us was immediately successfully replicated. And I'm going to give you an answer that might not seem obvious at first, but in my opinion explains the whole situation perfectly. I think the industry has finally discovered one more secret ingredient of Uncharted, something we'd been missing for years. It's not a perfect gameplay loop, not a semi-open, semi-sandbox experience, not a light tone, not a wide-range geography, not performance capture standard, not world responsive, not set pieces and not money. Sincerity. Watch closely. Over the past few years, the real world has sunk deep into darkness. COVID, wars, environmental disasters, political regimes that have completely lost it. As a species, we've messed up. Badly enough that it's become uncomfortable, even unbearable to look out the window. This wave of exhaustion from the global mess pushed us toward our screens, TVs, computers, phones, looking for some kind of escape. Like addicts, we reached for simple, sincere, hopeful stories in popular culture. But for the past 15 years, popular culture has mostly been feeding us endless exaggerated brutality. Cynicism turned up to the max. Sarcasm, passive aggression, hyper-meta-modern, meta-commentary, meta-irony, meta-universes. Real emotion ended up buried under layers of creative artificiality, and people wanted to dig it back up. Back in the 2000s, when the internet was expanding and globalization was accelerating, we ran outward looking for answers. We wanted we demanded explanation from the world. Why is everything the way it is? And be careful what you wish for. Over time, we got our answers. The world is simple, almost banal. There are no hidden meanings, no magical solutions, just ordinary human flaws. The same ones that dictate and will continue to dictate the structure of the world. Now we're no longer looking outward for answers. We're looking inward. If humanity as a whole can't be trusted to deliver anything good, maybe the individual still can. And all of this has marked the return of a new sincerity era. An era of heroes who say what they feel openly, who don't hide behind layers of irony, sarcasm and cynicism, who believe in something better, naively, maybe even foolishly. More than that, heroes for whom that better is actually achievable. You just have to really try. Films like Avatar, Superman and Project Hail Mary all feature characters who aren't overly complex or deeply conflicted. They're just trying to be the best version of themselves. And that simple, naive desire pays off. There's no other way, it's just how the genre works. Also, I've just noticed, all three movies involve aliens. Maybe that's a sign we've run out of our own supply of innocence and need to learn from our space neighbors. This rise of new sincerity is what's preparing the ground for the returns of something long forgotten. Simple, fun, naive adventure. On the horizon, we're already seeing the return of Pirates of the Caribbean. Work on National Treasure 3 has been officially confirmed. Even The Mummy returns. Well, I mean, again, just 3 years ago, Harrison Ford dusted off his hat one last time and somehow looked 40 years younger. Bringing us back to that era of that kind of adventure. And right now, a new Tomb Raider show is in development, drawing from the classic 90s version of Lara. not a victim of circumstances, but an adventurous treasure hunter. Audiences are craving simple, naive adventure stories, and cinema is finally starting to give them exactly that. Players are craving adventure, and they're getting it too. In 2021, the excellent Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy came out. It didn't sell particularly well, due to its close release to Marvel's Avengers, but those who actually played it absolutely loved it. It's an adventure built almost straight from the Uncharted blueprint. A gameplay loop that cycles between platforming, puzzles and shootouts. Spectacular set pieces, constantly shifting scenic locations, a charming, charismatic rogue who isn't Nathan Drake, but feels very close, and all of it is wrapped in a story with a naively optimistic message about found family. And the idea that doing good can actually pay off?
You're not alone, man. We're here for you.
2 years ago, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle was released, arguably the best game in the Indiana Jones series. Period. Gameplay-wise, it's not really Uncharted at all. It's more of an immersive sim. But in spirit, it absolutely is. A charismatic adventurer travels the world, not for money, but for the sake of the game. Because adventure is the meaning of life.
You can't just run away from your problems, Indiana.
Watch me.
That same year, Star Wars Outlaws came out. It's closer to Far Cry than Uncharted, sure, but it still stands as the closest attempt yet to bring the long-dead ragtag concepts to life. And with its action platforming, shifting environments, cover-based shootouts, stealth, and rogue outlaw but ultimately kind protagonist, both players and journalists couldn't help but draw comparisons to Nathan Drake's adventures.
Let's get out of here.
And finally, last year, Joseph Fares made a triumphant return, delivering his most ambitious adventure yet, and gamers showered Split Fiction with top-tier scores. Once again, comparing it to Uncharted, this time in the most flattering way possible. The characters there can be summed up in just a couple of sentences, but they carry a simple, life-affirming message.
So this is what it feels like, hey? Having a friend.
Wait, do you hear it? That's Uncharted, trying with all its might to come back. We need Uncharted, and I don't even mean a literal continuation. Leave Drake where he was left. Let everything be fine for him. And I'm not talking about spin-off. What we need is that big adventure across all corners of the planet, with bright, spectacular action scenes, with constant shifts in gameplay, with a ton of money poured into it, and of course, with a naive, optimistic hero at the forefront. An adventure that's about to see the light of day. Because 16 years later, another shot at becoming Uncharted is taking someone whose name is
Bond. James Bond.
I mean, judging by the trailers, we've got everything on the checklist. A perfect gameplay loop, a semi-open, semi-sandbox structure, a light tone, wide-range geography, performance capture standard, world responsiveness, set pieces and money. All of this. There's a motorcycle chase, a lavish gala sequence. There's even a shootout in a plane's cargo hold. And first of all, what's more important? There's sincerity. Because this isn't the weary, battle-worn somber Bond we know from the Craig films. Because this is a young Bond, before he earned his many battle scars. Well, metaphorically speaking, he jokes, he smiles, and he hasn't yet grown into the trademark cynicism we are so familiar with from the rest of the Bond movies.
Housekeeping, I presume?
We need Uncharted, and we're getting it on May 27th this year.